Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to break down a pretty radical power shift, how Europe went from this, messy patchwork of feudal kingdoms to the powerful, centralized nations that we all recognize today.
So let's just dive right into this. Imagine that for a second. That chaotic power struggle, that was pretty much the reality of late medieval Europe. You had kings, you had incredibly powerful nobles, and you had the church, all of them wrestling for the upper hand. It created a really fragmented continent.
So, on one side, you've got the old feudal system. It's this messy web of competing powers where, your loyalty was to your local lord, and the king was often just one big player among many. But the goal, what everyone was moving toward, was a centralized state, a place where power flows from a single, sovereign monarch, and that creates a unified national identity.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, let's set the stage. Let's take a look at the world these new rulers were about to inherit.
You've got to understand, at this time, kings were often kings in name only. Seriously, they were constantly having to negotiate with these powerful nobles who had their own lands, their own armies, and on top of that, a universal church that held just immense spiritual and political authority over everybody.
But then, starting around the late 15th century, something changes. A new breed of ambitious, really strategic rulers starts to emerge. And believe me, they were determined to change the entire game.
And listen, these were not your typical medieval kings just fighting the same old turf wars. We're talking about people like Henry VIII in England, Ferdinand and Isabella over in Spain, and Francis I in France. They were different. They weren't just trying to manage the old system. They were actively, strategically dismantling it to pull all the power under the crown.
So the big question is, how did they actually pull this off? Well, what's fascinating is that even though they were in different countries, they all followed a surprisingly similar playbook for building up and centralizing their power.
We can really break their whole strategy down into 3 key moves. Number 1, get control of religion. Number 2, build a government that is loyal only to you. And number 3, make absolutely sure you're the only one with a real army. You put those 3 things together and you've basically dismantled the entire old feudal order.
Now, this first step was absolutely revolutionary. Think about it. By making faith a matter of state policy, these monarchs found a direct path to controlling not just their people's land, but their hearts and minds, too.
And they all had their own ways of doing it. In England, Henry VIII just went ahead and declared himself the head of the church. Simple as that. In Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella used the brutal Inquisition to force Catholic uniformity. And in France, Francis I just cut a deal so he could appoint his own bishops, which effectively cut the Pope right out of the picture. And look, this was not just a friendly suggestion. These monarchs backed up their religious changes with the ultimate penalty. Acts like this sent a crystal clear message. If you challenge the king's power over religion, you're challenging the king himself. And that was punishable by death.
Okay, next up, they basically rewired the entire machine of government. To break free from those powerful, often rebellious nobles, they had to create a brand new system of administration that was loyal to one person and one person only, the king.
So they replaced the unreliable feudal lords with this new class of professional administrators. In France, they actually called them nobles of the robe, people who owed their entire careers to the king. They set up royal courts like England's infamous Star Chamber to enforce their will directly, and they created central taxation to pay for it all, completely bypassing the local nobles.
The final and maybe the most crucial step was to get a monopoly on military power, right? A king can't really be in charge if his own nobles can raise armies to challenge him whenever they feel like it.
So how'd they do it? They created professional, standing armies that were loyal to the state. And they funded them with those new taxes and by making alliances with super wealthy banking families, like the Medici. All of a sudden, they didn't have to go begging their nobles for troops anymore. They could just pay for their own, giving them a true monopoly on force.
But you have to ask, was just having a powerful king with a big army enough? This massive new concentration of power, well, it needed a new philosophy, a new set of ideas to justify it all to the world. And this is where thinkers like Niccolo Machiavelli come into play. In his super famous book, The Prince, he basically argued that for the good of the state, a ruler had to be practical, not just pious. He separated politics from theology, saying a leader's real job was to keep power and stability by any means necessary. Then you've got the theorist Jean Bodin, and he took it even a step further. He argued that the monarch's power wasn't just practical, it was absolute, indivisible.
He claimed the king was essentially a substitute for God's authority on earth. And right there you have the intellectual foundation for the all-powerful absolute monarchs who would come later.
So what was the ultimate result of all of this? The religious reforms, the new bureaucracies, the standing armies, these new political ideas. What did it all lead to? Well, essentially, it led to the birth of the world that we live in today.
So, in short, by crushing feudalism, creating professional governments, and unifying their people under one religion and one ruler, these new monarchs laid the entire groundwork for the modern nation-state.
That historical shift is really their most enduring legacy. The very idea of a sovereign country with defined borders, a central government, a national identity, all these concepts we kind of take for granted, they really started to form right here as a direct result of what these monarchs did.
And that's our explainer on the new monarchies. They used religion, bureaucracy, and military might to forge order out of chaos, and in doing so, built our world. It's definitely something to think about as we continue to see power shift and centralize, even in our own time.